Hello everyone. The last time I made this video it was way too long, so I decided to do it again and make it a little shorter. So what this video is about is what I like to call a post flare-up pattern, and it's pretty much just an observation that I made while dealing with ankylosing spondylitis. And what I call a post flare-up pattern is pretty much that what happens to the bones, what happens to the joints affects the muscles, and what happens to the muscles eventually affects the joints. So it's something I like to point out because sometimes you have a flare up and the pain just lingers around forever. There was a point in my life where I spent literally almost 2 years in pain, and there was never a day where there was zero pain. And during that time, I made the observation that sometimes you have your flare up and you develop these habits, these patterns. It changes the way you move, the way you walk, and then you end up having stiff muscles, tight muscles, weak muscles. And then when you have those weak muscles and tight muscles, you get strain on certain joints and certain parts of the spine. Now, when you have strain in certain joints and certain parts of the spine, you will get inflammation in that area. So what's happening to the muscles now, after what happened to the joints, is now affecting the joints again, and the cycle continues. So this is just one thing that I would like to show you guys, mainly because once I was able to spot this thing and I was able to work on specific muscles and do specific exercises for my specific case, when I did have flare-ups, they weren't as bad as they used to be, and they never lasted as long as they used to. So that's something very, very, very good that helped me out a lot. So the first thing I want to look at is the SI joints. I point out the SI joints first because that's where most of my problems started. When I first started having problems back in high school, these guys here were just inflamed, and I was having problems with my knees and my feet. And I was having a lot of issues down in this area. So I started in the SI joints, and then I pretty much take on the video from here. If at any point you have a question, as usual, you can ask, and I can try my best to answer it. If I don't know the answer, I'll let you know I don't know the answer. Now, when you get inflammation in the SI joints and you have pain coming from this area here, you get a change in what we call the gait. And the gait is pretty much just the way you move, the pattern in which you walk. That is what they call the gait. Now, if you're having pain in the SI joints, it is common for you to distribute your weight when you walk down further into the legs. So the what we call the thigh muscles, the quads, these muscles here get a little tighter. The hamstrings get a little tighter. The calves get a little tighter. And then when you step onto the ground, right, because there's not that much support up here anymore because you're in pain. When you step into the ground, you no longer step and roll with the foot. Now you're just stomping on one side, or maybe stomping on both sides, and that's only putting more strain up here. Now, one thing that I like to point out here is that when you have tightness in the quad muscles in the front, specifically the rectus femoris, you get something very interesting. And the interesting thing that happens is that when this guy here gets very tight, it likes to pull down on the pelvis. The pelvis is the bone right in this area. So it connects here onto the pelvis, and when it gets very tight, it pulls down. Now, these muscles here in the legs are very strong, extremely strong. So once you have one of those strong muscles pulling down in the pelvis, you're going to get a change in posture. Okay, now that change I'm going to show you right now. The next thing is that I like to point out is the psoas muscles. If you have tight psoas muscles, maybe from sitting around too long, or maybe just from inflammation in the lumbar spine, or just, whatever it is that your daily activity requires, you're going to get a similar pattern where these muscles here are going to be pulling down on the lower back, and also in the pelvis. So imagine having this group of muscle here tight along with the rectus femoris. What you're basically going to get is what they're showing you here. So the psoas muscles, their job is to bring the leg up, right? Kind of like when you're in a seated position, how the leg just comes up. That's their job. So if these guys are tight right in this area here, along with the rectus femoris, the quad muscles, the pelvis, just like they're showing you here, is going to be tilted forward. Okay, it's going to be tilted this way and back that way. Now, why is this important? It's important because when the pelvis comes forward, right, your body naturally wants to walk in an erect position. It wants to walk straight. So when you try to walk straight, the lumbar muscles down in this area have to do extra work to keep your body up straight. Okay, this group here is called the erector spinae group. And basically what this group of muscles try to do is basically that, keep your body up straight when you walk. If you're having trouble staying upright when you're walking because your gait has changed and your pelvis is being pulled forward, all of these guys here are going to get tight. Now, one thing you can try now is if you stand up, you can try it now, and let's say you're having lower back pain. If you stand up now and you try to touch your chin, okay, so the chin is on the other side of the head, obviously. If you try to touch your chin, okay, down to your chest, so you try to lower your head down like if you're looking down, you might feel some pain down here. Okay, so these group of muscles, some of them go all the way down the spine. Okay, so if they go all the way down the spine and they're tight down in this area because they're trying to keep you erect, it is not rare to have tightness all the way up and have pain all the way up the back. Okay, now again, once you have tightness in this area here, and mostly because the pelvis is being pulled forward and you're having pain in the SI joints, obviously you're going to get lower back spasms. And once you start having lower back spasms, then obviously the next thing that happens is that we only have more limited movement in this area. Now, obviously, if you have more limited movement in this area and you're having back spasms and some of the pain is going all the way up the back and you're having pain in the SI joints, the next thing that happens is, you guessed it, more changes in gait. So there are many pictures out there where you see people with AS in severe cases. A lot of the times they have they kind of walk like this now, where everything is just kind of like tilted forward and the spine is just starting to ankylose and everything is just rolling downhill from there on. Another thing that I would like to show is that, like I mentioned earlier, when you have changes in the way you move, the way you walk, you also have changes in the way your feet move on the ground. So like I mentioned earlier, instead of stepping and rolling with the foot, you have more of a stomping motion. Now, this stomping motion, okay, only creates more tightness in the legs, okay, because now we're not having a natural stride as we walk. Now we're just having kind of like a stomp and shift, or maybe just stomp, stomp, stomp all the way through. Another thing that happens when you change the way you walk and the way you move, because you're trying to avoid pain, is that other muscles in the area of the pelvis start to suffer. It is not rare for these muscles to start weakening. Once these muscles start to get weak and you try to walk to your destination, or just trying to run, what you get is a shift in the hips, and the hips start to shift to one side as you're walking. So now this is another change in the gait that I like to point out, because usually when these muscles here start to spasm as well, just like the lower back, you start to have pain here right in the hip bone, right on the side. And this is an area that's very common for a lot of people. The next thing that happens is that other muscles in the hip rotator group start to get tight as well. So one of the muscles I like to point out is the piriformis muscle, which is this one right over here. I'll get to this one back later. This is very important, this one muscle here. But basically all of these muscles in the hip rotator group are now they're suffering now, because now there's a change in the way you move and the way you walk, because all of these muscles work together. It's not like one muscle is just doing all the work and then the other guys could relax. Your body works all together as a unit. So if one muscle is suffering, let's say this one here, if this one here is suffering, or this one here is suffering, or all of these guys are suffering because the SI joints are not able to absorb shock as they normally could, you're going to have problems in all of these guys over here. One that I want to show right now is the hamstring. So if we start to have weaknesses and pain in these muscles up here in the butt area, because your body wants to walk upright, one thing that is going to do, one of the changes that is going to do, is that it's going to get the hamstrings to work a little harder to keep your body erect. So going back to that picture of the pelvis, I'm going to show you right now. So going back to the pelvis, as you can see here, once the pelvis is being pulled forward, right, your body is leaning this way, but your lower back and the erector muscles are trying to keep your body up straight. So one adjustment that your body will try to do to help these muscles here to keep you erect is that it's going to tighten up the hamstrings. And when you tighten up the hamstrings, as many of you know, okay, I have tight hamstrings, my hamstrings are tight. As many of you know, it's not a happy feeling, it's not a good feeling. It's a very strange ache and it's very annoying. But I like to show the hamstrings because the hamstrings are made up of three muscles: the bicephomoris, semitendinosus, and semimembranosus. Now, these three muscles here attach to one area in the pelvis known as the ischial tuberosity. Now, this muscle, this area here, okay, this I'm pointing out because a lot of people get pain in their lower butt. Okay, when they're walking, they feel pain in the lower part of the butt, and this is when I started to get suspicious about things, because if I have pain coming because I have inflammation in the SI joints, it made no sense to me that I was having pain in the lower butt when the SI joints are all the way up here. So this is one thing that really started to boil my noodles, because doctors are telling me one thing, yet I'm feeling something else. But I like to point this one here because a lot of people have problems here. A lot of people. And I didn't know just how common this was until people started telling me that they had problems sitting. A lot of people were telling me, when I sit around for a long time, I get pain in the butt. Well, when you sit, you are sitting on that area right there. So if this area is tender, because all of these hamstrings are pulling down to keep your body erect, if this area is tender because it has a lot of tension coming from these very strong, powerful leg muscles, it is understandable that when you sit on it for a while, it's going to feel uncomfortable. It's kind of like sitting on a needle, because that's how tender these areas get when they're having trouble. Another thing that I would like to show, going back to this area and the piriformis muscle, is that when the piriformis muscle gets tight, there is a nerve that runs right through the middle of this muscle here. And that nerve is very familiar to a lot of you guys. That nerve is the sciatic nerve. Now, when the sciatic nerve is going through the piriformis muscles and it's pretty much being choked by the muscle, the nerve starts to get irritated. And when that nerve gets irritated, you get what they call sciatica, which is very interesting because it basically means that most people out there, I'll say 90% of people out there who say they suffer from sciatica, don't really have sciatica. What they have is something called piriformis syndrome. And the piriformis syndrome is when the piriformis muscle is tight and is choking on that sciatic nerve, which will give you the same pains and the same feeling, tingling sensation, numbness, achy feeling that you can't really spot as sciatica. It's not true sciatica, because true sciatica comes from up here. It actually comes from the actual spine, where certain bones are choking the sciatic nerve. But in this case, is a muscle. Now, how do we get this out? Well, I guess I'll have to make a video on that. But either way, the next thing that happens is sciatica. So now we have tight legs, a tight pelvic area, a tight lower back, tight psoas muscles, tight all of this stuff down here, changes in gait, and then we get what we call, and then we get what I like to call a frozen lower back. So now your lower back is all tight by all of these muscles here. This is not a good thing. It's not a good thing to have a frozen back because 65% of your weight rests on your lower back. See how thick these bones are? Is because most of your weight rests there. Your upper body, most of your upper body weight rests right here in this area. So now if this area is frozen and the spine is starting to pretty much get stiff, and it's starting to stiffen up because there's no mobility, it puts a lot of strain on this area here. And when you have strain on joints, it is common for those joints to get inflammation from that strain, right? So now you're having all this pain here, and now all of your body weight that rests here is being distributed down into the legs. So if your weight is shifting down into the legs, not only are we going to have more weight on the SI joints, which they cannot support, but we're also going to have more weight on all of these muscles in the pelvic area. You're going to have pain in all of these muscles over here that support pretty much your core. This is the center of your body. This is the core. This is where everything rests. Okay, so now if we're not having much movement here and we could barely bend to the side or even front and back, the next thing that happens is that the upper part of the spine starts to take over, which is the thoracic spine. Now, the thoracic spine is made up of 12 vertebrae, right? But the one that I like to point out the most is the T5, which is right around this area right here. Why? Because T5 is pretty much almost right in the dead center of the 12 vertebrae in the thoracic spine. Now, once the T5 starts to absorb most of the movement that's happening up here, that can no longer happen here, now the strain over here starts to affect the muscles in this area. And now we have to start, and then we start having shoulder pains and pains over here and pains all over this area here. This pain also radiates up into the neck, up into the head area. And this is interesting because once you start to have tightness in these muscles up here in the neck, right, this affects your circulation and you may not be aware of it. Once your blood circulation starts to get affected, we start to have strange feelings. So we start feeling fatigued, we start feeling tired, we start having headaches, and we start having all of these mental problems that we look around and we go, why is this happening to me? Why do I feel so tired? Why am I sleepy all the time? Well, it could be a circulation problem. I'm not saying that it is, but it could be. Okay, so the next thing that happens, the next thing is, like I was mentioning here, the T5 strain. So all this area here is frozen. And now the T5 up here in this area has to do a little extra work. And the extra work that it's doing is affecting not only this area, but it also radiates to the front of the body, which is very interesting. Not interesting in a good way, but interesting for a lot of people because a lot of people have pains in this area as well. This is one thing that to me was an incredible observation because a lot of times when I had this feeling back here, like if my back was on fire, I wasn't sure if it was because I was walking too tight, maybe it was cold outside and my body was just stiff, or maybe it was feeling that way because I was trying to work out and I was trying to get back into boxing. I couldn't figure out why it was hurting back there, but now I understand. It's mainly because the T5 was having issues. Okay, now how do we stop all of this from happening? It's not a matter of stopping, it's a matter of understanding where it's coming from, where it's originating. So for me, I understood that it was originating in the SI joints and that it was affecting the psoas muscles and the rectus femoris and the muscles in the legs. So I focused a lot on strengthening my butt, keeping it nice and strong, keeping the front part of my body nice and loose. So a nice psoas muscle stretch was pretty much a must for me every day, just to keep this area nice and loose. Also, doing exercises that promote good posture and keeping the body well aligned and nice and flexible. So it's important to get things like, let's say, if you feel comfortable going to a chiropractor or acupuncturist or massage therapist, it is important to do those things, but at the same time, it is also important to strengthen the muscles that are not strong. And it's not easy to spot because one thing leads to the other and then leads to the next, and before you know it, you have pain in so many places. You know, you can have pain all the way up here, but just like I showed you, all the pain up here originated from the SI joints down here. Okay, so understanding this helped me understand a lot of things, and most of the pain I got rid of it doing rehab exercises, exercises that are specific. So, is running a good exercise for me? Absolutely not, because running puts a lot of shock on my SI joints, and that's only going to make things worse. So instead of running and putting more strain on my legs, I think it was better to focus on building the body from the ground up, making sure that when I was walking, my foot was not stomping, but instead it was stepping and rolling, okay, and focusing a lot on the gait, on the way I walked, right? Because we know that the SI joints absorb a lot of shock. So I figured if I can strengthen my legs and have good balance and keep my muscles nice and loose, then maybe my SI joints won't have to absorb too much shock. Okay, so maybe whenever the flare-ups come around, maybe they'll be less severe because there's less weight being distributed, right? So I decided to focus a lot on those type of exercises. Now, going back to this area here, the gastrocnemius muscles, or like you guys call it, the calf muscles. Going back to the calf muscles, right around this area here. Okay, if you're standing and someone let's say, starts squishing right around here, these muscles are going to pretty much be pulled. Okay, so it's like pulling them up into a flexed position. Now, once you have that muscle in an up and flexed position, okay, well, they get the foot to push forward just a little bit, right? So when you're walking, okay, right here in this position, like on this foot, and you have something strapped right over here, they're going to get the foot to roll a little better. Okay, so it's not going to just stomp and swing. It's going to step and kind of just roll, because now we have this muscle in a natural flex position because there's something strapped to it. Okay, why am I pointing this out? I'm pointing this out because I was watching TV at my girlfriend's house a while ago, and I remember seeing this. Okay, and what they were showing this is that supposedly there is a trigger point here that sends a signal up to the sciatic nerve and relieves sciatica. Okay, it's not going to relieve sciatica because of a trigger point. What the trigger point is doing is that it's getting the foot to push out as you walk. So if you're able to get just a little more push out here, there'll be a little less strain up here. Okay, and a little less strain up here means less pain. Okay, however, you can just correct this by doing calf exercises, balance exercises, exercises that keep the ankles nice and strong. Okay, so this is just one thing I wanted to point out before you go waste your money buying stuff on infomercials. So just like I showed you, all of this started at the SI joints, led to a change in gait, led to changes in the leg muscles and the psoas muscles, which then led to a change in the pelvis area, right? Which then led to spasms in the lower back because my body wants to stay erect, right? Lower back spasms common, which led to even more changes in gait, changes in the way my feet move on the floor, changes in my hips, right? So now they're not just walking naturally, now they're just swinging all over the place. Changes in the hip rotator group, tightness in the hamstring, which leads to tightness in the leads to tenderness in the ischial tuberosity, which leads to pain when I'm sitting. Okay, and also when I get up from this chair, I get this back spasm that comes right back and grabs me. It reminds me that it's there, right? Which then leads to tightness in the piriformis muscle, which gives me sensation of sciatica. Which all of this put together gave me a frozen back, which then started to affect my thoracic spine, the upper part of my back, which then affected the rest of my body going up in this area, which also affected my mood, the way I felt, my energy level, my focus, my clarity, which could have just simply been avoided by doing simple psoas stretches, good posture exercises, good walking from the ground up, and keeping these babies here a little more protected. Okay, so that's my video. Just wanted to show you that. Obviously, these are observations that I made after doing a low starch diet and keeping the inflammation low. I believed in the no starch diet when I first started doing it, and it took a very long time to get any results from it. And mostly it was because I still had these misalignments and all of these muscle problems that were happening that were now causing me problems. So this is when I made the observation. I said, wait a minute, if I'm doing this diet and I'm HLA-B27 positive and I'm diagnosed with ankylosing spondylitis, and Carol Sinclair guaranteed me in her book that if I'm HLA-B27 positive, and I tried this diet, she guaranteed that in at least 3 months I was able to feel better. It did make sense to me that I was not feeling better. I was still in pain. So that's when I started to observe the way I walk, the way I move. And together with diet and exercise, this is how I was able to put my body back into remission. Now, healing the gut and healing the body and being able to eat normal again and being able to live normal again without having to be a prisoner to exercise, that's a whole nother story, which I will leave for a whole different video. Okay, this is what all of these videos are about, just me sharing my story and how I got back to where I'm at. Thank you for watching. As usual, if you have any questions, feel free to ask, feel free to comment. That's pretty much that. That's my video. Take care of yourselves and each other. God bless.